Buenas tardes a todos. My name is Robert Hoban, and I am here to talk to you a little bit about scaling your business globally in the international marketplace and some of the things that you should be aware of. And because we're a little bit behind schedule, I am going to try to cut this short and maybe take some questions so that we can move this over to Carolina next. For those of you that don't know, my name is Bob Hoban. I work at a firm called Clark Hill. I sold my law firm on July 1st. Clark Hill is a top 100 firm globally, and I lead its cannabis division with over 100 attorneys. I also have a consulting firm. That consulting firm is called GPS. And GPS, Gateway Proven Strategies, is a company that has served and serviced and scaled companies all around the globe. And it's basically created on its own through its clients a global supply chain. What I describe to some people is in my office, we have a large map on the wall. And every time we do a transaction that's global in scope, we put a pin in the transaction. And we move a string from where that product is sold to where it's ultimately acquired and distributed, or where it's transformed with different color pins. That, my friends, is the global cannabis supply chain. Of course, it's much larger than the one on my wall, but where would you go as a business owner in Colombia or anywhere else? Where would you go if you wanted to get that information? If you wanted to go from a Colombian producer of a wholesale material, an ingredient, or as a retail product producer, how do you find buyers when your market in Colombia right now is mostly for export only? Where do you go? Do you hire a business development or sales staff and go out on your own and meet people in Europe? You meet people across the region? Do you meet people in the United States? How do you find out how to access the global cannabis supply chain? This is a very important thing, because if you're producing material, and trust me, I know how difficult it is to build a pipeline, to build a facility, to build a production channel. If you're doing that, how are you going to sell that material? Where are you going to sell that material? Is that material a consumer packaged good? Is it a consumer packaged good ingredient? Is it a pharmaceutical ingredient? Is it a finished pharmaceutical formula or product? These are the things that you need to think about if you haven't thought about them already. So where do you go? What does your buyer look like? Is your buyer a German company that's looking for THC products to put into the German marketplace? If you're a flower producer, is your buyer somebody in Poland where they would import the material and transform it into a high-quality THC or other cannabinoid oil? These are the things that people that I talk to don't have answers to. How can you have a license that is expensive and time-consuming and very difficult to get through the process of getting permitted when you don't know what your buyer looks like? And if you're selling THC products alone, I question whether that's a good strategy. And here's why. Where can you sell THC material right now in the world? Not the United States. You can't import that into the United States right now, where the most consumers are. Can you import it into the European Union? Yes, but individual countries with limited rollout, and they don't need that much material to satisfy their consumers in a place like Germany. And those countries will also create their own cultivation supply chains very soon. So they're not going to need that material. So what do you sell? How do you connect to these other companies in other regions around the world? That's the challenge. And that really, legitimately, is the million-dollar question. Because you have companies that have substantial investment, substantial time in asset supply chain build-out, and regional connections. But how do you connect the dots? That's a question that nobody seems to have an answer for. If we were in another business, if we sold cerveza, if we sold beer, we know what the channels look like. We know where to go for a distributor in every country in the world. We know how to create our supply chain. But in cannabis, it's different. There's no established channels. There's no established trade groups. Everything is fractionated country by country. And within every country, it's fractionated. Think of how many interest groups are here in Colombia. Think of how many groups purport to be the ones with the most information and the best members. That's not a bad thing. That's good. Competition's a very good thing. But the point is, everybody thinks their perspective of something is the right answer, and it's not. But that's the challenge that's before you. So where do you sell products? And what products do you sell? Let's talk about that for a minute. For an exportation process, how do you tap into that? You need to find what that pipeline looks like right now. Who are the companies that are actively buying? This is easy to find if you haven't done this already, because many of these companies have some sort of public investment, meaning a public market or public dollars from the Frankfurt Exchange or the Canadian exchanges or the the UK Exchange or the Australian Exchange. And what happens when a company is on a public exchange? They have to put out press releases on a regular basis to show their investors what they're doing. Those press releases show you where things are going. But then you need to dig deeper, because there is a number of companies, some of which are located here in Colombia, and they put out press releases on a regular basis for exports. But what are they really doing? They're shipping this from themselves in Colombia to their office in the European Union somewhere, in London. That's not international commerce. That is a logistics test. There's nothing wrong with that. But you always have to dig deeper to find out who's really doing real things in this industry. Now, what if you have a finished good, a retail good? Where does that retail good go? Right now, education from your average consumer within Colombia, let alone the rules that allow for the designation of how much CBD can go into a product, etc. Those rules are not final. We don't have enough consumer education within Colombia to understand that these products, that these materials can provide a medicinal or a therapeutic benefit. So how do you create a market? And I'm not picking on the Colombian marketplace. This is the same exact challenge that we're seeing in nearly every Latin American country. Because, of course, this comes from cannabis. And cannabis has, as we heard from Senator Galan, etc., there's a stigma attached to this plant. There's a stigma because of the history of the drug war that has ingrained itself culturally. Are people going to turn to something from cannabis when cannabis has been said to be this awful plant that has created so much in terms of social problems and narco-trafficking problems over the years? So how can you convince people, aside from a younger generation, that this is something that they can turn to and use? That educational component is very challenging. But how do you create a finished good and sell it into another market? What are some of those markets in your region right now? The Mexican marketplace. Right now, you can register a product, non-intoxicating, meaning CBD or CBG or CBN. You can register that product in Mexico with the equivalent of their FDA called COFEPRIS. That's going to change, though. Why? Because here's your challenge. In a place like Mexico today, you can bring a CBD product into the marketplace if you register it with COFEPRIS. But when the new law passes, which should happen by the end of this year, it's going to take CBD products and move them into a narcotic lane, a drug lane, meaning you have to go through a higher level of approval. You have to go to a doctor to get these materials. The same thing's happening in Brazil. You have the ability to sell products to consumers right now as an over-the-counter, as a supplement. a wellness food product. But then Anvisa, their equivalent of the FDA, is moving forward with a plan to put that into a pharmaceutical, narcotic, prescription role. So how do you continue to sell your product when the game keeps changing? The game's changed in Colombia a number of times with regulations, but the global game changes every single week. So how can you keep up as a producer of materials? Well, it comes down to your infrastructure. What is your facility? What is it capable of? What does it do? What can you produce? What is your extraction technology? Can that machinery, that technology be used to produce something different that seems to be in demand in other places? How do you even get that information? These are the challenges, and some of you might sit back and say, yes, you're telling me exactly what I already know because we've gone through these challenges. Some of you might say, I didn't realize it was that complicated. But it is, and it changes every single day. Every single day. And if governments keep changing the law, advancing progress with cannabis policy, creates a standard today, and then other governments or other governments that they follow change the standard tomorrow, then your product might be out of compliance. So make sure you have the most versatile facility possible, number one. Number two, understand that your product is going to go into a number of different swim lanes, so to speak, a number of different highway lanes. Again, I said this before, but are you selling an ingredient for a pharmaceutical product? Or are you selling an ingredient that goes in food or a supplement? By the way, the base material for all of those things might be the exact same product. The API, the pharmaceutical grade material, might be the exact same compound you sell that goes into a beverage or a candy bar. But the buyer can't know that. And your salespeople can't sell to a consumer product person and a pharmaceutical group. You need different salespeople to interact with different types of industries. It's not good enough to say, we produce high-quality oil in Colombia, we're licensed, we have GMP, and we have API-grade certification. That's not good enough, because they need to hear that sales pitch from somebody that understands that industry. So you have to understand how you're segmented and how that plays together. Now, I talked a little bit about GPS, and I wanted to go back to a tool that we have. And this tool is useful. And it sounds like I'm trying to make a sales pitch, but I just want you to let you know that these things are available, not just from my company, GPS, but from a number of different companies. We have a tool called Compass. Compass is a 150-point algorithm. What does that mean? Everybody says algorithms. It means that we have a tool that we've gone through that in this space can evaluate and provide a rating for a company. So if you're going to acquire or invest, you can have that access to that information that is industry specific. Why is that important? Because you can go to Cowen and Company, you can go to any analyst and read what they say financially companies will do, good, bad, and different. But they don't touch on industry-specific due diligence. So if you're going to invest, you need to have somebody, the highest quality person possible, to review the financials and provide projections there. But they're not looking at the industry trends because they don't know them. They're not looking at what I'm talking about, the global cannabis supply chain, because they don't know it, because there's not one place to go get it. They don't know that there are political changes that I was just talking about. That, for example, that there is a bunch of people, a number of North American companies selling CBD in Mexico right now, but that's going to change and be driven into a narcotic pharmaceutical lane in the near future. They don't know that that's coming. That's the kind of due diligence that this product does. That's another thing that it does. If you have a company and you're seeking investment, do this on yourself. Figure out where you score and what the gaps in your company are. That's how you scale globally. We've built out projects all over the globe, and we work to connect those things. We have a project in India. We have a project in Belize. We have several projects in Mexico. We have a project in Paraguay. We're connecting the dots on those projects. That becomes our supply chain. We build it out. The companies that want it built out pay us to do that. We take a small piece of equity, and then we get royalties on sales. And why? We're willing to bet on the sales because we know we can make sales because every project we work on around the globe is connected to one another. But how do you differentiate yourself? You have to be flexible. As I mentioned, please don't think you're just going to go out and sell THC products because you're not. Not anytime soon. And not unless you have API grade certification. The future of THC products are locally produced unless they're for mass-produced medicines on a global scale. And those need to be API grade certified materials, and you need to start that process right now because it's time-consuming and it's expensive. And if you clear that process, you will be in a position to potentially sell to researchers, physicians, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies. That's the end game, everybody, for THC. Selling a product that produces a euphoria that people smoke or eat and it makes them feel good. That's a good thing. It's no different than selling beer or any other spirits in terms of providing something. Of course, we know cannabis has tremendous medicinal benefit. I don't minimize that. But that's what you're selling. How is that any different than owning a beer company? The differentiating factor and the opportunity in front of you is enormous if you can look at the opportunity that presents itself by going to the highest level possible with your THC products. But the other products, those are the products that we're going to see as ingredients in food, in supplements that will help you sleep, that will reduce your cholesterol, that will make you less anxious during the day. And like supplement law, generally speaking, you can't on the bottle of those products say, this product reduces anxiety. You can't say that. You can't say, this product promotes sleep. You generally can't say that. But you can if you use another ingredient that's known to do those things. Let's talk about sleep for a second. CBN. I'm going to butcher the word, but cannabinol. CBN promotes sleep, promotes restfulness. What is an ingredient in the natural product space that does the exact same thing? Melatonin. Melatonin's sold all over the world. People take it every single day, multiple times a day. So why not create a formula that contains melatonin? It just is made better with the addition of your proprietary blend of cannabinoids, non-intoxicating cannabinoids. That is an access to a marketplace. And by the way, that's what's going to happen in the United States. You're not going to see in the United States bottles of CBD being sold 5 and 8 years from now. You're going to see CBD as an ingredient in the melatonin product, in the product that has statins for cholesterol reduction, in the product that's a root extract called valerian root extract that reduces anxiety. You're going to put CBD in those products. That is how you're flexible and you see where things are going. You have to delegate appropriately. Every owner of every company thinks that they need to do everything themselves. And I can't say that they're always wrong because you always do things better for yourself than other people do for you. But you have to trust. This is not an industry that's small. This is not an industry that's stable. This is an industry where you need to get as many people involved as possible so you can move the ball from here to here. You have to have an internal communication framework. Everyone in the organization needs to share information with one another. If I have a business development staff and they're at Expocannabiz in Cartagena, and they're not going back and communicating everything they saw to their team on the ground, then it was a wasted opportunity. Their job is not simply to come here to find a buyer and a seller. You know how rare buyers are these days. They're very few. But the information sets the table for something that I've been talking about a lot, which I don't see happening yet, and that is the idea of some sort of clearinghouse or distribution network. I don't mean a web platform that simply connects people. That's for children. The people that make that platform want to get paid for the platform. I'm sure it's useful. But what about distributors? Again, I said this before. If I have a beer and I want to get my beer in as many stores as possible, I go to a distributor. You need to go to a distributor for this, and those connections become the pitch point country by country. Find those distributors. In Europe, the distributors are not unique to cannabis. They sell a number of other products. Now I'm dead here. There we go. How do you stand out from the crowd? What is your product? Do you simply produce a high-quality, consistent oil? Or is there something about your oil that makes it better? Is there bioavailability in your oil? In other words, does it absorb into the body quickly? Or do I take your oil, 10 milligrams of CBD, for example, and only 2 milligrams get absorbed into my body? What good is that? You just wasted 8 milligrams of CBD that you paid for. Use bioavailability technology so you only need to put 2 milligrams of CBD in something because that's the effect and the absorption in the body. What about water solubility? That's the topic of the day because beverages are a big thing, particularly beverages with CBD in it. So how do I put a CBD in a beverage? Oftentimes a beverage with gas, carbonated beverages. You can't shake up a carbonated beverage. You know what happens if you do. With water solubility, that product maintains consistency, homogenation throughout. Those are the types of things that your products from an oil standpoint need to have is built in. If they don't have those things, you can't compete, or you're simply a raw material supplier for somebody else that's going to add those items into their products, and then they get to charge the premium and you don't. That's another important point when you're thinking about scaling globally. How else do you differentiate yourself? The story of the region. How do you tell somebody that a Colombian-based and produced product is better or why it's better? What's the story? For example, I'm working on a project in India. This project is in northeastern India. This is the birthplace of cannabis. The plant was generated long time ago in this region. That's the story. They wanted to tell a story about how India is the world's pharmacy. That's a great story. People get that. But the real story is this product comes from the place where cannabis was born. And from a marketing perspective, it's better because of that. What's the Colombian story? What's the Mexican story? What's the Chilean story? What's the Brazilian story? Those things need to come out because most of the countries in this region look at this for export only. And if you're looking for export only and developing that education, that domestic distribution network, you need to create a story as to why people should buy your product because that's the marketing edge that they need in their jurisdiction. And it can't just be we produce consistent oil at a low price point. Guess what? Have anyone heard of the continent called Africa? There are 9 to 12 African nations right now producing cannabis and cannabis oils, and they're producing it at a lower cost than anywhere else on the planet. So if you're looking at low cost, that's not a game that you want to play because that's a race to the bottom. Low cost combined with consistency, with technology, the differentiator, combined with the story is how you sell products in a global marketplace until this becomes a commodity, and we're just not there yet. Unique packaging if you have a retail product. You can't just put a product in a bottle with a dropper and say, here's my tincture. You can. People will use it, but it doesn't stand out from the crowd. You know how much I've tried CBD millions of times. Clients give me CBD because I'm an old man who thinks I'm a young man, and I still play basketball and go snowboarding and do all of these things, and I come home and my hip hurts and my knee hurts, all of these things. So I try everything. What makes the difference? Believe it or not, I know the technology that's in the products, but I still pick the one with the nicest packaging. Packaging matters because the packaging sells to the person for their particular kind of use, and that's the ultimate thing that you need to think about. Look at special certifications. We talked about GMP, API grade, things of that nature. Organic certification, free trade certifications. Look at things that attract your consumers because you're speaking to their philosophy on life, their belief system. Unique product SKUs. How many times can we see a tincture bottle with a dropper? Nothing wrong with that. I don't make any fun of that, but it's not a different product. So if there's 10 of them on the shelves, what am I going to pick? I'm going to pick the one that the person told me the best story about or that has the best packaging. How do you separate that? Gummies. Gummies are all over the country and all over the world right now. How do you sell a gummy product and differentiate it? Is the gummy for sleep? Is the gummy for rest, recovery? There are marketing ways to do that without violating a claims process on your product. And what's the quality of the material? That's definitely worth commenting on and the like. Competitive pricing is important, but it should not be your end-all be-all because the folks that go to the bottom of the pricing barrel immediately get thrown out with the waste. It's not about getting the lowest price point. They want the lowest price point today, but tomorrow they want that same price point with more volume and better technology involved. So you can't race to the bottom or you will lose at the bottom in a global commerce. You need dedicated account managers. I touched on this before. What do I mean by that? If you're selling to a pharmaceutical company, they cannot talk to the same person that's selling your food-grade material. They need to talk to somebody that's selling API-grade material, somebody that's worked in the pharmaceutical ingredient world, or they won't ever return your calls and you've just ruined your reputation. If you're selling to a CPG, a consumer packaged good manufacturing company, you need to have somebody that understands consumer packaged goods talking to them. Very, very important to have dedicated account managers for every single aspect and every single point of sale. You need customer service, particularly if people take products. I have a great client in California. He sent me some samples. I opened the bottle. It smelled horrible. It was rancid. I sent it back to him. He said, that's impossible. I said, it's just me. It's okay that it was impossible, but you need to get to the bottom of this because what if I was a consumer? I just would have spent $60 on this bottle and there's no way I'm putting it into my mouth. So how do you address those problems, not give the industry or yourself a bad name? Online ordering and tracking is an absolute must internally. And integration with popular technologies. What are some of the popular technologies? Companies and technologies that would ultimately rate what you're doing. Now, if you grow your business, you have a couple choices. You need to raise more money. You always need to raise more money. Is it debt or equity? But make sure you do it with the right people that have the similar philosophy to how you're going to grow your business, and make sure you do it in a way that you're not overestimating your value or your worth. Take on the right partners at the right time. Don't just take a check from somebody because you will lose if that person wants an immediate return when you have to project legitimately a 5 to 8 year investment return. Access to cash is always the most limiting factor because even if you get distribution, I had clients in 3,000 stores in Europe before the novel foods designation. The client said, we have 7,500 units we're putting into play. The store calls a week later, says we sold all 7,500 units. We need 25,000 units in 2 weeks. My client didn't have enough money to produce 25,000 units in 2 weeks. It needed a line of credit. If it didn't produce 25,000 units in 2 weeks, that retailer was going to cut them off and move on to somebody else. You have to anticipate success, and that means access to cash. Due diligence. We talked about the Competence product. Please do your due diligence. Don't just take money from a Canadian enterprise because they're willing to put it in your pocket. I say that tongue-in-cheek because I know that happened a lot. At the end of the day, do business with people that understand the global landscape and how it all fits together. Don't guess. Learn by doing. People know this stuff. They've done it over and over and over again. This is a global cannabis economy that's existed for almost 15 years now. It's not new. Don't listen to what people say. It's not new. It's not stable, but it's not new. It's the farthest thing from new. It's new to you. everybody else it's not new to. So don't think it's new. We're all going to figure this out together. You're going to get eaten alive. Go multi-local. Invest heavily with people that understand and align with you from a local perspective. And don't skirt compliance. Compliance is your biggest asset. Consumer protection and the like. I ran out of time, so I don't have time for questions. And we had a little interruption with the lights, but I really, really appreciate everybody showing up. If there's anything that I or my team can ever do for anybody in this room, no matter how small or how big your company is, please ask. We love to help people succeed. That's how we make a living. That's how people tell other people to come to us. So thank you very much for your time. I wish everyone the best of luck, and have a good evening in Cartagena.